So this is the continuation of Latvian Gambit, and I've already shown a couple Latvian Gambit games, so I think we need to pay a little more attention to some of the principles involved of the Latvian Gambit. I play a particular kind of Latvian Gambit, and that is the Latvian Gambit is not a sound opening, so what we need to do is stick to some principles which make it at least tolerable and give us a high chance of winning when people are unfamiliar with it. So the first principle is to develop quickly and open the F file, use the F file where possible. Obviously, F5 is a big part of the Latvian Gambit, and the sooner that file gets open, it can be used against us back, but in variations where we move our queen to F6 and get our queen out as the first piece, which goes against all the basic principles of chess, it does a lot of good to open that F file and pressure the F2 pawn and possibly even pressure the G2 pawn using the fact that the F file is open. So we'll show you how to do that a little bit. Another principle is to occupy the center. As a nuisance, you're maintaining that E5 pawn of yours, and where possible, you're protecting it with just the barest possible possibilities by simply counterattacking, other things. Sometimes you're maintaining an E4 pawn. And the E4 pawn is coming as either a push or the capture of F5 to E4, and where that happens, you're barely going to be able to protect that pawn, and in a lot of cases what you're going to do is start counter-protecting. In other words, you're going to start attacking other areas of the center in order to protect that pawn and distract white. In particular, D4 is susceptible. When you have your queen on F6, you can move your knight to C6, a whole variety of things to try to pressure D4, which makes it possible actually to reinforce your E4 pawn with a pawn, with your own D5 pawn in some cases. So we'll show you how that works. And there's a lot of give and take in this opening. As I said, if white plays correctly, black is pretty much cooked. So the third principle is you can consider castling either side. It's nice to castle kingside where possible because automatically you get a rook on F8 on an open file. However, castling queenside has its advantages too, especially if you have a pawn at D5 already, and white has this pressure on these white squares. One of the problems of the Latvian Gambit is that it's easy to get a lot of checks in as white, either on B5 with a queen or bishop, or on H5. And in either case, there are forks involved and things flying around that can create a lot of problems for black. So one has to be aware of these things. In fact, the initial move of the Latvian Gambit, after the initial capture, and by this is a game against somebody rated well in the 2100s with lots of experience. And this person played a pretty good Latvian Gambit, and we're going to analyze it with the engine. I've never seen it before with the engine, so we're going to have to look at it. So that's the correct capture, and now queen to F6 is a defensive move. And the reason this is a defensive move is you're preventing queen to H5 check, because you can respond to it with G6. After G6, the knight sack in G6 doesn't work because your rook on H8 is defended by your queen. So some players will hesitate and pause, and you can tell how familiar they are with this opening when they stop right here. When they say, what am I going to do? Do I retreat my knight to C4? Do I play D4? Do I check? If they're considering checking, they're already in deep water. So this person is playing a good modern type response, and he's going to be pressuring what I have to give him. I think knight to C3 was more accurate, and as you see now, the computer is even suggesting D5 now, which allows a check and then the capture of the pawn on D5 with the queen. Well, the exact fork I was talking about. So this is not something that you have to take lightly. These things can blow up in your face. So I play this, which is not the soundest idea. However, when we play D5, we give up the E5 square, and one of the things I don't like is I don't like a knight on E5, so I'm preserving my D pawn to go to D6 in some cases. Now it's saying you should play D5, which is probably correct, but notice he's still only half a pawn up, and this is very tenuous. The question is, will he push here, which allows me simply to do a whole variety of little tactical shots, like move bishop to C5, or I could even just move the knight to a variety of good places. Or is he going to protect that pawn, or is he going to retreat to e3? So we'll see how the game plays. He protects the pawn, which is the weakest of the responses, and now we get an immediate advantage. Okay, so here we have queen to h5 check, and as you see, there is a defense, and it is a queen exchange to covering that d pawn, simply retreating the queen to f7. So you don't really have to give that up. So you're just moving your queen a whole lot of times here, and you're allowing him to get away with equality when you should get an advantage. So we'll see what he does. Now he retreats. This is Nimzovich style retreat. And this kind of retreat is aimed at basically undermining d5. In other words, he's going to attack d5, but he's not in the greatest position to do so at this point, because in attacking d5, he needs to play c4, and he's already played c3, so he's wasting tempo, so we protect it. And there he moves bishop to e2, which is a standard move as white in this particular scenario. And I do believe I played bishop to d6 here, and the computer likes that, which to me is a nice aggressive move. And that's even suggesting white castle, which we'll see what happens here. He castles. And now we're going to castle long, or are we? Now I moved knight to e7. I guess I'm just a slave to flexibility. So I've given him equality, and now the question is, where's he going to do? What is he going to do? I'm poised to attack. You know, I can castle queenside or kingside. If I castle queenside, I'm going to move h5 and allow him to have that pawn, which I don't think he really wants, but it's going to avoid a lot of exchanges when he starts moving things to g4. So let's see how this progresses. So now he moves f3. Very tempting move. Now, one of the principles I said was we want to open our own f-file. So we could castle, we could, castle long, we could do a whole variety of things here, but that's the right move. And I made the right move, and now he's forced to go into some sort of defensive posture and sack a pawn back by moving f4. And look at that, it even suggests g3 at a certain point. The computer does, which is, I believe, what he played. So he moves g3, and now he's in a lot of trouble. So he gets the sack, and it's coming back, and now he gets the other sack. And now, of course, the key is king to h1. Does he move king to h1? And what does that allow? How does the attack progress? Well, we have a lot of pressure, and we are up, and the computer says we're up happily, but it says he has to move king to h1, not knight to g2. He moved knight to g2, and it's interesting to see how the computer is revisionist in thought. A second ago when I showed you this, the computer only had us up like, 3/4 of a pawn. Now, as soon as we play it, the computer decides he's down 2 and lost. So he is lost here, and this is what happens. This is a very short game. We attack. Obviously, what we're going to do is go after his knight, and now of course he shifts his rook up, which is pretty much forced, and we castle, which is the correct move according to the engine. Now he needs to play bishop to e3, but he's still lost because we're going after his f pawn, and we're going to attack a pin piece that way. So he makes a horrendous blunder here. He took a long time, and it's difficult to come up with good moves when you're being attacked like this. So he thinks he's going to move knight to d2 to f1 and preserve his abilities, but he just ends up forked and resigning. So that was the end of this game. He resigned, and that's that. So did we follow our principles? Well, yeah, we developed our f-file. In the end, we were pressuring f3 a lot. We occupied the center, certainly, and we considered castling either side, which worked out fairly well, being fairly flexible. Computer said we should have castled long earlier, but castling short turned out to be quite useful. So that's the end of this example.